Welcome to Saturday's Warrior, the channel where we talk all things BYU and Big 12. And Happy New Year to everybody. And as to celebrate the outgoing year and the outgoing football season we had today, we've got Jason Shepard on with us to kind of look back on the season that was and dole out superlatives or awards or whatever. But he's joining us from Cincinnati. He's out traveling with the women's basketball team right now. But Jason, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, it's my pleasure, guys. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, I'm out in Cincinnati hanging out and looking to talk some BYU football.
Getting Skyline chili while you're there. That's
please, no. I honestly, I've tried it once, and that was enough for me.
Well, I still have not, so I'll take that as fair warning. But yeah. I really appreciate you coming on. As we mentioned, you're with the women's team. Before we jump into football, why don't you give us a little plug or talk a little bit, give us an update on the women's team so far this season? Because I knew that they were hoping that they were going to be, competitive in this year and better than last year, but it looks like they've come off to a really hot start. Were we expecting this?
Yeah, I mean, the non-conference was, I would say there was only one real surprise, and that was the home loss to Northern Colorado. That's certainly one that the players and coaches will tell you that they shouldn't have lost. And that was a home game. And so I think the non-conference schedule is off by one game based off of what they expected. But yeah, this is it's a team that's got a lot of new players. You've got 7 new players, whether it be freshmen or transfers that have come in. And so you're dealing with trying to have so many new players come into this system and integrate them and hit the ground running. And so far, Coach Whiting and her coaches have done a really good job of sort of mixing it all together. BYU did drop its conference opener, a hard-fought game against Arizona at the Marriott Center. And quite frankly, BYU had a lot of chances to win that game. There was a late turnover that kind of changed things in the final 2 minutes. But yeah, we're out on the road for Cincinnati. And then after we play the Bearcats, then we're heading to Morgantown, West Virginia to take on the Mountaineers. So this should be a fun trip.
Awesome. Well, we're actually both based out of Virginia, so you're closer to our neck of the woods. So I hope to get out there for the men's game, but I don't know if that's going to happen either. All right. So that's great, though. It feels like since last year that they've really been able to build on the program. Again, I know that there was some turnover and new head coach and everything, so it'd be exciting to see how they fare in conference play. But as I mentioned at the top of the video, and I should say before we get any farther, I always forget this part, but I should plug my own channel. Please like this video. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. We love talking BYU and looking back at the football season, but we're also going to continue going throughout the basketball season as well as off season. So, but today, as we mentioned, we are going to look back and give out awards to the football team, some of the key players and plays and whatnot. So we've come up with a list of several categories. And so I think we'll just jump right into it. And Jason, we'll kind of go around the horn. Jason, Adam, me, and we'll go through and kind of discuss. But I thought we'd start kind of on the player side of things. So our first category is best newcomer to the team. And that could be freshman, transfer, return for mission, whatever. Best newcomer on the team.
So for me, this one, and the fun part about all these that we're going to go over is there are a lot of guys that you could use as the answers. And that's usually indicative of a really good season when it's hard to sort of narrow these things down. I landed on Jack Kelly as the best newcomer. And what he did coming in from Weber State was fantastic. He was an absolute beast this year on the defensive side. I thought there were times this year he was the best defensive player we had. I thought he was fantastic. He really helped with the pressure on the opposing quarterback. So for me, the best newcomer was Jack Kelly.
I had the same thought, Jack Kelly. I thought it was interesting this year where there weren't as many newcomers as last year. And so a lot of guys that I thought of, maybe Will Farron, oh no, he was here last year, or some guys who developed and really had a breakout year. There weren't as many newcomers, but I would have to say Mark Collins, who came over with Jack Kelly, did a great job in that other corner spot. Everybody was wondering who was going to step in to go on the other side, in contrast to Jacob Robinson, and could we lock down? And the success that secondary had was incredible this year. 22 picks to 12 passing TDs given up. So I'd lean. I mean, Jack Kelly was there. He was certainly in my top picks as well. But I like that Mark Collins just because of the performance of the secondary overall.
Both good answers, and I've got both those guys throughout our categories. But I also went with Jack Kelly. He's just been unreal, and something that stood out to me is like, the casual fan who's sitting there watching this game, not looking back at film or anything, and you're just watching in real time. You can see the impact he is having, and not just when he's making the tackle, just in every play, like his closing speed and throwing off the quarterback and everything. Like the fact that it would stand out, and almost every time I'd be like, oh, who was that? Oh, of course, it was Jack Kelly. And now that's not fair because the secondary often isn't on the screen for as much time. But so for me, he just was lights out, and I think one of the team's top players. So I don't know if we need to come to a consensus or not, but we'll go with that. With that. So
they're all good choices.
They are, and to your point, Jason, a lot of these categories were really hard, and I think that's a really good sign, and I think that speaks to the season that BYU had this year. All right, so second category is breakout star, and I don't know. I don't know. Let's start with you again, Jason.
Yeah, this is a little tease because I have a feeling, I don't know about you guys, but at least for my list, this is a name that's going to pop up quite a few times. And for me, the breakout star was Will Farron. What he did this year was so important to what BYU ultimately was able to do from a wins-loss perspective, but also how they were able to make decisions throughout the game. What he did, not just from actually making the kicks, but giving the coaches the confidence that if they were anywhere near his range, they were going to give him a shot because they had confidence in him. And more times than not, he made it. He ended on 16 straight field goals to end the season. I think he was 3 of 4 from 50 plus this year. He was an absolute weapon. And so for me, he was the breakout star.
Yeah, and I had Will Farron as well. The other name I want to put out there, though, is Sione Moa. His performance in the K-State game and then his performance in the Colorado game with some of the blocks he threw down were just ferocious. And so he runs. I love the contrasting style to LJ Martin, where LJ Martin is steady. He's so good at falling forward. He's going to get to the yards. And Moa comes in there like a maniac, like he's just going to run over you. So it's fun to watch those two. I think we'll have a great combo next year with those two in the backfield. So I really like Sione Moa, but what Will Farron did and being, first team All Big 12 is really incredible.
Yeah, so for me, initially, my mind went towards defense because just the way our defense played all season, but it was hard to single out a specific player because so many guys across the board were making plays. And then, I love the Will Farron choice. In fact, you might have flipped me on this one, but I also went with Sione Moa, but I also did kind of slash Haonga because together they really running back. We did another video prior to the season, and running back was one of the position groups that we were most worried about because we felt like, we've got LJ Martin, but how much depth is there? And these two guys really came in and proved like, hey, we've got depth and they're young, and neither one of them, played as many snaps as that's kind of why I split it, is because both of them kind of, between injuries and being, down in the depth chart, didn't get as many. But between those two, I think they really helped solidify in our minds, like, we've got some guys that are going to, at running back, we feel comfortable with, for years to come.
Well, and to continue that point, I mean, obviously we're talking about this past season, but when you look forward, obviously Hinckley Ropati and his decision because of the new JUCO rule and whether or not he decides to take advantage of that and come back, that stuff is still up in the air. But, you're not going to have, you're losing quite a few of the running backs that you had, behind LJ Martin for this past season. And so those two guys specifically, and then you've got some guys coming in that were, that came in, will be coming in out of high school, they're going to be part of the core along with LJ Martin. And it was good to see, what BYU has waiting in the wings for these upcoming seasons.
Yeah, definitely not a position group we're worried about anymore. So great. So next category is unsung hero.
Okay, you guys may think I'm crazy for going this route. We've sort of been on the same page on a lot of these. I'm real curious if we end up on the same page this one. I went with Tyler Batty. And that may be a head scratcher for some people. Like, how in the world is he an unsung hero when he's one of the team leaders and he's one of the more prominent players? But for me, I'm not sure he still got the credit he deserves for what he does on the defensive line. And look, and I know maybe the sacks aren't what he wants, but he absolutely controls that defensive line. And I remember even going into this past year, was talking with some NFL scouts just sort of off the cuff. And, they were talking about Tyler Batty and how Tyler Batty is the guy that stands out on the film. So I just think for what Tyler does and even the credit he gets, I'm still not sure it's enough credit for just how disruptive he is to the opposing offense. So I went with Tyler Batty, and I know you may think I'm crazy with that one.
Well, so I have a different name, but I'll sort of affirm that choice because as a casual fan and a huge fan of Tyler Batty, I feel like I don't see him enough in the backfield, winning one-on-one matchups, getting the sack, which is what you expect your defensive end to do. But he's first team All Big 12. NFL scouts are drooling over him. He obviously has the complete package. And I feel like I don't necessarily understand the in-depth technical side of defensive line play to appreciate what he does, what he brings to the table. Because all I'm seeing as the casual fan, someone who hasn't played college football, is he winning his one-on-one matchup and sacking the quarterback? And he did that against Colorado. He had an amazing game against Colorado. And I kept thinking, where was this the rest of the year? Like, that's what I want to see. But obviously, everyone else sees what he's doing, and he was integral to the team. So I think it's fair to keep him as the unsung hero.
Well, and the other part about this is the other way that you can sort of look at it is how much attention does he draw from the opponent's offensive line? How many double teams does he take that allows other guys on the defensive line or the linebackers who are blitzing to be able to get to the quarterback and put pressure on? I think that's also part of it.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. We'll miss him. The transfers coming in are pretty exciting in that position. We'll have to see, but we'll miss Batty either way.
And I thought he got plenty of praise for his halftime speeches. So I feel
hey, we know he's interested in going and playing next to Max Crosby with the Raiders.
Well, my unsung hero I put down as Bruce Mitchell. And he did get a lot of recognition, a lot of credit for what he did. But the fact that he was able to switch from D-line to O-line, step into multiple positions on the offensive line, and dominate the way he did, he would come out as the top-graded PFF offensive lineman in a couple of his first games ever played at guard or when he moved over to center. So I thought he was incredible. Certainly deserves all the credit he had. But I think you can still call him an unsung hero because of how vital he was to the team this year.
I went similar, which I think it's easy to say, the O-line is often overlooked and doesn't get enough praise. And I think with the improvement we saw with this O-line, they deserve a lot of praise. And I really struggled with this category to name somebody, but I went with Caleb Etienne, mostly because of, he got talked about a lot last year, but for all the wrong reasons. And then to make the switch to be, I think regularly was graded amongst the top players in PFF on the team, and definitely looks like has a future in the NFL now. And so I think just, to make that switch and to be playing, in that pivotal position there, and with all that being put on him and really looking the part all season, I think he did get recognized for that. But I don't think we can, talk enough about what a difference with this offseason, whatever it had made for him and how far he came.
He was my favorite story this year. I mean, just to see that turnaround. I remember when TJ Woods named him the starter left tackle like early summer, and I'm thinking, okay, well that's probably the decision that's going to drive our season if he's just building up his confidence and trying to. No, he really stepped up, and whether it was the way Woods coached him and crafted his technique, whatever it was amazing, absolutely amazing. Comes away first team All Big 12. Such a cool story.
Yeah, well, and good for him for sticking to it as well, because look, after you have a year where things just don't go well, a lot of times guys check out, and now with obviously the transfer portal, you may look to go somewhere else, but he stuck it out here. He liked the direction that the offensive line was going, and certainly with the new coaching staff, I think that helped on the O-line. And then, like you guys said, I mean, he was phenomenal and showed why BYU went after him in the first place, because his season was excellent.
Yeah. Big dude. All right.
Yes, he is.
So, all right. So next category is Mr. Clutch.
Mr. Clutch.
So I threw this in later after that. So
no, this one is pretty easy for me. I went with Chase Roberts, and how many times did we see this entire season when Jake Retzloff needed to make a play, it went to Chase Roberts? And it was, I mean, you can look back on countless times where it was a big, 3rd and long pickup, or even a 4th and 2. And not only was he targeted, but he made the catch. Speaking of Roberts, I could not say enough good things about what Chase did this year. And I am so excited he decided to make the decision to come back in 2025, because man, you have him back another year with the productions coming back on offense. I mean, that we saw how good the offense was for the most part this year. Another year with essentially the same group, the same position players. Man, he was so good this year, and I can't wait to see it in 2025.
He was Mr. First Down. I mean, if you needed to get to the sticks, it kills me, because sometimes a receiver's out there, and for whatever reason, they don't know where the sticks are. The route's not run to the. He would get to the sticks every time. If he caught it 2 yards short, he'd somehow find a way to get it over. So he was fun to watch from that aspect. He was actually the first name on my list, but I'm going to go with someone else because I've got a bigger award for Chase Roberts later on. Ooh. So I'm trying to spread the love a little bit. But I put down LJ Martin here, because he could not be stopped in the backfield. And so if you needed the big yardage, if you needed to run clock, if you needed to pick up 3 or 4 yards, it just seemed like it happened every time. He would make something out of nothing. He'd get hit with 2 guys in the backfield, and he'd still go ahead for 3 yards. He'd get hit by the linebackers 5 yards in, and he'd fall ahead for 5 more yards. So it just seemed like his consistency, for me, makes him Mr. Clutch this year. The coaching staff kept saying they wanted to get him 20 touches a game. I don't know that he ever did. I'd love to see him just get turned loose as the feature back and just see what he can do, because it's amazing when he touches the ball. He can't be brought down by 1 or 2 guys.
Yeah, that's a great pick too. But I also went with Chase Roberts. I mean, he's just the safety blanket, right? You can go to him every time, and his stats weren't as, I think, eye-popping as they could have been, because you have other really good receivers around him, and that's something BYU does well, is spreading the ball around, but especially with someone like Darius Lassiter. And now he did have some clutch plays throughout the year, but he also had some big drops. It seemed like almost each game there was a key drop in there. But Chase Roberts was just lights out for me. So that's where I went with this one. Actually, the first name that came to my mind, who's not eligible for the category, was Jay Hill, really, because he had the whole defense just playing clutch. But yeah, I decided to stick with the player.
I almost went with Jay Hill for quite a few of the answers to these categories.
I did as well. His name might pop up later, because he was what he did was amazing.
Yeah, well, and some of these plays that I'm sure we'll talk about, they happen like BYU had a lot of plays that people kept calling like lucky plays all season, but these guys were in the right place and they caused the havoc. Like they put the pressure on, they were in the right place and responded the right way in these situations time and again. Like sure, fluky plays happen, but those were not all fluky. They created that, and that was Jay Hill.
Yeah.
Okay, so now let's move on to our MVP awards. We'll start with special teams MVP. This should be fast.
Yeah, I mean, Will Ferrin. This is again, we're gonna hit a run of Will Ferrins throughout this this show. But yeah, Will Ferrin for me is special teams MVP. And the fun part about the special team side, this is another one where, I mean, Keelan Marion could have been one. Parker Kingston could have been one. So there are a lot, but at the end of the day, I went Will Ferrin.
Yeah, for variety's sake, I'm gonna go with Keelan Marion. It's an All-American. I mean, we don't get a ton of those at BYU lately, and the 2 kickoffs in one season, just stuff that hasn't happened. Could have had a couple others. He was so electrifying to watch. Very, very fun. Excited to see him next year.
I went with somebody who was also eligible for Mr. Clutch, but Will Ferrin. Yeah, he just. There's not much to say. Yeah, he was definitely a big part of the team, and actually, Jason already has said it. So let's go on to defensive MVP.
I went with Isaiah Glasker. You know, I had mentioned that at times Jack Kelly was the best defensive player on the field. I think as the season progressed, Isaiah Glasker was the guy that was the most consistent. I love his motor. I love his attitude. So for me, I went Isaiah Glasker for the defensive MVP.
Yeah, I'm going to agree. Isaiah Glasker, his size makes him unique. His energy makes it so not only at 6'5", he can cover a lot of the field. His motor covers the rest of the field, and it seems like he's everywhere, making the big plays, whether it's an interception, a sack, making a clutch tackle. He was so much fun to watch, and if his ceiling's even higher than this year, you know, watch out. Next year should be fun.
You know, you guys are starting to change my mind because I actually went on because I was worried. I was like, how much eligibility does he have left? I didn't realize like just how young he was.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
His bowl game interview, he's talking about how at the beginning of the year he was hoping he could get on the field. You know, they were asking, how did this happen this year? You had a great. He's like, I want to get on and get some plays. I was a little injured last year, couldn't break the 2 deep the way I wanted to, and he emerged not only as a starter but the star.
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys may have changed my mind. You talk about his motor. It's funny going back looking at some of the plays as I was preparing for this. In that K-State game, everyone talks about running in front of Parker Kingston, but also in the play, with Tommy Prassis and the scoop and score, he was right there with him too. I mean, he was just there ushering people in the end zone all night. Yeah. So I think that's a great one. I went with Jack Kelly, which we've already talked about him, but. I mean, there's so many guys on the defense too. It was hard to really narrow it down. Okay, so now on the offensive side of the ball, who is our MVP?
I went with Chase Roberts, and I think it kind of goes back to the Mr. Clutch. When you look back, there were more big plays from Chase Roberts than anybody else. He was so close to getting 1,000 yards receiving. And I think he already is putting himself in line with some of the other great receivers that have come through BYU. And so for me, and everything he did throughout the entire year, because he's been good from start to finish, there were a few drops and things like that, but more times than not, when a big play needed to be made on offense, Chase Roberts was involved. So for me, he got the MVP.
I'm going to go back to the offensive line that doesn't get enough love, but I'm going to go with Connor Pay, mostly because of the difference you saw when he was out. I think Bruce Mitchell stepped in and did a great job. There were certainly some good things that happened, but to me, it was night and day being able to pick up blitz packages, being able to really give Retzlaff time to throw. I thought Connor Pay was amazing throughout the year, and we've shown that we can. Someone's going to step in and fill those big shoes, but those are big shoes to fill. I thought he played great.
Yeah.
Good thing we have you on here tonight, Adam, because usually it's you and me that are agreeing on too many things. But now tonight, Jason and I are the ones that are agreeing, and you're the odd one out. But yeah,
I like to think of ourselves as the smart ones. Can we say that?
Uh-huh.
I
would say so, and we could take a vote on it.
Hey, we're going to win it 2-1.
Please don't comment. Don't vote in the comments. We're just gonna do it.
Please don't.
Yeah. So I would say this is the offensive MVP because what he did out there was just obscene all the time. He's just, I mean, we've talked a lot about Chase Roberts, but yeah, I think in terms of the offense, there's again a lot of guys contributing, but time and again that you knew you could go to him, and you always felt good when the ball was going his direction. So, all right, so that brings us to overall MVP, and I'm kind of curious to see how you guys went about this. But who do you have now that we have by position group? Who is the overall MVP of the entire season?
Okay, we made a joke about this earlier, but and this may be cheating. I don't know. I went with Jay Hill. I did. I mean this may not be a legal selection because he's a coach and not a player. But I just don't know how a lot of what we saw this year is possible without Jay Hill and what he has done with this defense in the last 2 years. It has completely changed everything. And I'm talking about the play on the field, the overall attitude. I mean, obviously, certainly there's the scheme change, but I also think what it did was it allowed for the offense, when the offense did have some issues, it allowed for a little bit of leeway because the defense was so dominant that the offense didn't have to carry as much. Mm-hmm. And so, again, you may not want me to go that direction, but I went Jay Hill. The guy's an absolute stud.
I think it's fair for all the reasons you listed. You could almost put Papinga in there as the special teams coordinator as well. I mean, without those special teams, I don't think we do what we do this season. They were really remarkable. This is where I slated Chase Roberts for all the reasons we've talked about, and the clutch catches and everything he did on the field. Obviously we could have slated him in numerous different categories like we have, but he was so good in so many big situations. I've got him as the overall MVP.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. I mean, you think about how relieved all of us were, or elated, that he was coming back for another season, because I thought he was gone for sure. So, I mean, that's a great one. But I went, a similar direction as Jason. I just put the defense, which again is attributed to Jay Hill. I mean, it was across the board. And when you have, what was our final 22 interceptions for the season? Or
22 picks on the year.
Yeah, more than any other team.
And it wasn't just like one guy. Like we had those other seasons where it was like, I feel like Kai Nakua caught just about every interception. Right. So it was across the board. We had all sorts of guys.
Led the nation in picks and in number of players getting interceptions. That is the defense as a whole. That is Jay Hill.
Yeah, 100%. And so I really do think that that's where it belongs. It may be breaking the rules, but we make the rules. So it's kind of like, whose line is it anyway? There are no rules. So just go for it. So, all right. So now let's move over as we into we've finished up the players. Let's look at the plays in the game. So what was the best highlight reel moment of the season?
I went with Parker Kingston's punt return versus K-State. Because of the degree of difficulty that was shown, it was probably the most exciting play that we saw because of the way it started out, because it didn't look like it was going to be anything positive, and then it turned out to be what it was. And then you factor in what that game meant for BYU at the time and moving forward. For me, the highlight reel moment, and there were a lot of them, look no further than the Utah game for a couple of them. But the highlight reel moment for me was Parker Kingston's punt return versus K-State.
Yeah, and I'm going to get back to that punt return because I've got it slated in other spots. That's such a cool moment. I mean, when you think back on the season, to me, it's got to be that or maybe Will Ferrell's kick over Utah. So there's some big moments. But for this one, I put Darius Lassiter's touchdown against Oklahoma State because it was a game winner.
Yeah.
We would have won the game without the K-State punt return. It would not have been as exciting a game, but I do think we would have won it without it. That game winner against Oklahoma State just brought down the house and preserved the perfect record at the time.
Yeah, and that one was my runner-up. I also went with the Parker Kingston play, but because when you think about it, in 5 years from now, which one are we going to be like playing on a highlight reel? Would you go, oh yeah, do you remember that? And people will watch, click on that and watch that. Part of what made and it was a highlight because it was fun to watch. It wasn't necessarily the best play because it was one of those, oh no,
Yeah.
yes, and then it turned very good. So it went from very bad to very good. But it was entertaining. And it was just one of those fun moments that I think we'll always remember watching. Whereas that other play was really good, but it was the context that really set that up, and which is why I went with the Kingston.
And he puked on national television.
I mean,
you got to take the whole play,
right,
all of it, including that.
Yeah, look, it's everybody's had those moments. It's just usually not on national television.
Okay, so kind of along the same lines, maybe it's the same play, maybe not, but for the special teams play of the year, Jason.
Special teams play of the year is Will Ferrell's field goal to beat Utah. What sent it over the edge for me is because it's Utah. It's to win the rivalry game, and it's to win it in Salt Lake City. So that for me just sort of trumps everything else. Had that not been the case, it's absolutely Parker Kingston's punt return for a touchdown. But you add in the Utah factor, and of course, for me, it's Will Ferrell's field goal to win.
Yeah, and surprisingly, Jason, you and I agree finally. This one, I don't think you can overstate the impact of this. I am not one that cries at BYU victories, and I did not shed tears at that one, but I was about as close as I've ever been watching that thing go through the uprights and having won such an emotional back and forth game in the rivalry game. So awesome moment. I think that one's got to be special teams play of the year.
100%. It's unanimous. And I thought it would be. And it's crazy because as I went back watching highlights for a lot of these games, there are so many highlights across the board that I'd forgotten about because there's so many memorable highlights throughout the season. And there were so many good candidates for this. Like so many, like we had the fake punt, we had the onside kick recovery, there's so many, surprise moments, and you got to love what they're doing with special teams. But because of everything that meant, like you guys said, I mean, when they were playing that, and I could tell all of a sudden, they got to where they wanted to be on the field, and then they started playing to set up the field goal kick. I mean, I wanted them to score because of the past. Like I did not want to leave it to a field goal try, and they did it with such confidence. And and it was just ice cold, and it was fantastic, and everything that it meant, and beating Utah. It's definitely
well. And remember, if you remember the TV broadcast, as BYU's driving, and it's becoming more and more evident that this is going to likely come down to a field goal from Will Ferrell. They take this shot of him on the BYU sideline, and doesn't look like he has a care in the world. He's laughing and joking. He has no pressure, or at least outwardly not showing any pressure. And I think that just sort of ups his lore. You know what I mean? It's like, I'll whatever side you need me to kick it on, doesn't really matter. I'll do it. Like I love that.
It reminded me of the old droid kick against Arizona where he can't find his cleats or something. He's running out there, just comes out of high school, he's randomly selected to kick that kick, it seems, and it's just there was so much story surrounding prior to the kick and after the kick, and I'll be interested to watch Will Ferrell's trajectory because at some point he's gonna miss. Every field goal kicker misses, and does he keep that same demeanor, that same ice cold, ice in your veins tenacity that he has, where it's just like, it doesn't matter, put it wherever you want on the field, it's going in type of attitude. And I hope that continues for him because he's just been so incredible.
Certainly love having him. Let's see. All right. So defensive play of the year goes to.
I went back to the K-State game. BYU's trailing at the time. And then you have Jack Kelly forcing the fumble from Avery Johnson, and then Tommy Prastis scoops it up. We've talked about the play, and then scores. And that puts BYU in front. And that was part of that crazy 2.5, 3 minutes that just sort of flipped that game. And BYU went from behind to in total control and dominating K-State. So for me, that was the play. And it was the play itself, but it was also what that play and what that game ultimately meant, because that really, if you think about it, that's sort of the game that put BYU on the national map and got everybody's attention, because K-State, we know how highly they were picked in the preseason. And so for BYU to win that game, it caught people's attention. And then they started to build off of that one. And it's kind of started with that play. So for me, that's the one.
And I think the season hinged on that play. That's where you felt it pivot to us, eking out a win at SMU, winning fairly comfortably at Wyoming, and everybody kind of wondering, what do we have? What kind of team do we have? And that play seemed like just, it changed that game, and then we blew it open after that. And so I think for defensive play of the year, you've got a lot of candidates. I feel like the 4th down stop against SMU to end that game, to win that game, was big. And something, it was so early in the season we don't really think about, but SMU turned out to be so good this year. And what we did against them, that whole game was a defensive masterpiece against one of the best offenses in the country. And to stop Kevin Jennings on 4th down was big. The Crew Wakely interception to win the game against Baylor, that was another just super clutch play. You don't get a lot of interceptions to win a game like that and to close the door. So those were big. But in the end, I got to agree with you that scoop and score just seemed like it pivoted the entire season for us. And I don't think there was a bigger play made by the defense.
My runner-up for this was from the SMU game for similar reasons, but it was the Mark Collins interception.
That was so cool. The toe tap.
Yeah. And they were on the cusp of scoring. Like had he not intercepted that was likely a touchdown, which definitely changes the rest of that game. But I actually agree with Jason on this. I don't know. Have you ever thought of doing this for a living, Jason? I really like.
You know what? I'm going to look into that.
You should. By the way, if you don't watch BYUSN or follow, BYU TV and radio, you really should. Great content, and Jason is often on there sharing his pearls of wisdom with us. So
I like that.
But for all the reasons you said, because of how pivotal it was in that game, that moment just set the onslaught. It was the beginning of that avalanche, and you could really kind of throw in the Batty interception, which was like 22 seconds of gameplay later. There's this other interception, this other defensive play, but and you also point out, but it also changed the season and opened our eyes to what the season could be. And so it was just a huge moment. You got to love that. And again, Glasgow was right there in the middle of all that, ushering everyone in to the end zone. But okay, so for offensive play of the year, who do we have?
I went back to the Retzlaff to Lassiter play, and we went. A couple of minutes ago, we were talking about the highlight reel moment, and for that one, I went with the Kingston punt return. But the reason I think I'm going to differentiate between these two is I really focused on the highlight part of what Parker did, with that play. But the play of the year and the offensive play of the year for me is the touchdown to Lassiter, because that was a game that if BYU loses, all the momentum has gone much earlier in the year, and so it sort of changes the trajectory of what BYU was able to do. And it looked like that game was over and that was going to be a loss for BYU, and for Retzlaff to find Lassiter and for the play to break down the way it did, I'm not sure I've heard Lavelle Edwards Stadium be any louder. I think the only thing that I can personally remember that was louder than that moment was in 2001 with Luke Staley down the sideline against Utah for the touchdown. Yeah. To me, that was the loudest I've ever heard Lavelle Edwards Stadium. That place was nuts. And for me, Retzlaff to Lassiter was number 2 behind that.
Yeah, that was awesome. I had that one up on my list as well. I put down the 4th down speed option against SMU to Miles Davis to win that game, just because the offense did not play well in that game at all. That was one of their least effective showings. I don't think SMU's defense was that good. They were on the road and just stymied at every opportunity, sometimes shooting themselves in the foot, going down to your third and fourth string running back, and they find a way to win on that play with Davis. Retzlaff times that perfectly to spring him on the edge and to put us in field goal position for Big Shot Bill to do his first game winner. So that to me, this was the toughest pick for me of all the things we looked at, because I felt like the offense was much improved. They were hot and cold at times, but they had a lot of different times where they came through effectively on a short field after a turnover. They'd punch it in, and they had a few highlight moments in the first half against Baylor where they really controlled the game, or UCF. But to come through in the clutch like that against an opponent who ended up being that good, to me, I think was the play of the year.
Peeing your pants is cool. Consider me Miles Davis. I'm going to miss being able to post that when we see good highlights from him. But that is a good play. But I have a confession, guys. So I actually didn't prepare for this at all. I just figured of copying Jason all evening because, again, I also went with the Darius Lassiter catch for the same reason. Everything
you could have just answered and not say the other part.
Oh, forget I'll cut that out. I have no notes.
You could have fooled us all. It would have been fine.
No, I just think back to, you talked about the loudest. I mean, that was the loudest quiet cheer I did all season because kids are asleep. But, that was because even the Utah game, that was awesome. But like, I had so many like emotions going on, but this was like just pure elation in that moment when they pulled that off. It was spectacular. And for me, that was one of the defining moments of the season right there that really showed that this team, even when they're down, could just find a way to win almost no matter what it seemed like. So, I go with the Lassiter catch. So overall, what do you guys have as our top play of the year?
I went with the Lassiter touchdown versus Oklahoma State. I just think it was that big. Look, I mean, you look at all the plays that we talked about. I think all of them are worthy of being the overall play of the year. But ultimately, I think we all default to offense usually on stuff like that. And so I'm going to go with Lassiter.
Okay. This is where I slated in the Kingston return, just because to me it's the most memorable, most improbable play of that year. Like you say, when you go back and you look at the highlights of this year, that one's going to top the list because it's just one of those jaw-dropping plays. So I put that one as number one overall.
I went with the Will Ferrin kick, 44 for 44. It just, I think because it's over your rival, it saved the perfect season, and it saved us having to lose our perfect season to our rival, and just how clutch it was in that moment. The Lassiter play was great, but it was against Oklahoma State. I think just everything that play meant, that really will go down in history. And both will, but definitely anytime you're beating Utah will, and continues the streak. Fantastic. So I went with that one. All right, so let's go quickly because I know we're on time here for Jason. So we got two more categories. We got best win and game of the year. You can kind of interpret that how you want, but let's go with best win real quick.
Do you want me just to answer both? We can do both best win and the game of the year.
Yeah.
Okay, because they're two different games for me. Best win, and I kind of touched on this earlier when I was talking about the Jack Kelly forced fumble and then the touchdown and sort of how it helped flip that game and how important that game was. To me, it doesn't matter that K-State, maybe didn't live up to expectations from the preseason. At the time, that was a massive win for BYU. And I still think it holds up because I still think K-State's really, really good. So for me, the best win was K-State for what it did for BYU to put them on the map. The game of the year is Utah. It's with so many ups and downs and, the ups and downs, the emotions, the swings from anger to elation. I mean, you had it all in that game. The fact that you're beating Utah at the end of the game on their field, that's the game of the year. So best win over the Wildcats, game of the year, beating the Utes.
I'm going to have to say best win, and maybe this is recency bias, but I'm going to say Colorado. The level
I
of
almost
talent,
said that.
Yeah, I mean the Alamo Bowl, biggest bowl we played in 30 years, and a legitimate opponent in 23rd ranked Colorado who've proven they can win. You've got a Heisman Trophy winner on the other side of the ball. We don't get to play that situation very often, and then to come out and dominate the way we did. It wasn't that we squeaked something out last minute or the ball rolled our way. We dominated start to finish. So I thought that was the best win of the year. By far, game of the year. I've got the Utah game as well. For all the reasons you said, you can't say enough about it. You got your rival feeling. I think they felt like they were robbed or something. That the game was stolen from them. It was kind of the vibe I got after the game, and so so it was a sweet victory.
Trying to understand and make sense of their reactions makes no sense.
Yes. Yes.
I'm going to surprise you guys. And for best win, I'm going to agree with Adam. So I think I saw something today. I think 8 million viewers on this game. Colorado with all the hype they bring. And like Adam said, to win in such dominant fashion. The reason why I don't have it as the game of the year was, I mean, this was a huge game, but also the offense left me thinking, man, we could have easily had 50 plus in this game if we kind of got out of our own way. I mean, not to take away from, what Colorado was able to do, but so I think it was a great win. Best win, ranked team. I think I think the perception that it'll give BYU, that one was probably the one that'll be one that going into next season is going to linger the most, that people are going to be able to look back on. But I think game of the year for me, going now to what Jason said, was K-State. It is just because of how it turned the season, how complete of a game. It wasn't like the Utah game that had like so much frustration and everything, like just on every facet, just BYU just completely dominated, and for just kind of turning the season on and opening our eyes to what the season would be and just the trajectory after that. And just to kind of see BYU keep rolling every week after that for most of the season. That one is really what stands out to me as kind of the defining, this was BYU when we were doing what BYU does. And so for me, that one stood out, but obviously beating Utah is always up there. And with how down Utah was, for me, I don't know. I just, there's a lot of mixed emotions in that game. I was very uncomfortable the whole time. So anyway, that's why I went with K-State. But anyway, we've gone on really long, so we want to go ahead and sign off. Now we'll let Jason go. Adam and I are going to stick around and talk a little bit about the bowl game in a little more depth. But Jason, we really appreciate it. You coming on. It was a lot of fun. And again, you make me feel smart because we had a lot of the same answers, only you're way more articulate than I am. Go ahead and plug where people can find you and your content.
Yeah, on social media, so on X as well as on Instagram, you can find me at JSN Shep. And you can hear me on BYU Radio. You can check me out on BYU TV. I'm on BYU Sports Nation quite a bit when either Spencer or Jerem need a day off. They go to the bullpen, and I get to come in and hang out on BYU Sports Nation. So, guys, thank you so much for having me on. It was a lot of fun to be able to sit and talk and reminisce on one heck of a BYU football season.
It was an amazing season. And that is a whole nother conversation where this stacks up amongst all the BYU seasons. But bottom line is that it was definitely a great one.
Yep, I agree.
Thanks, Jason. This was
Jason.
great.
Go Cougs.
Go Cougs.
Awesome. So if you're sticking around after the conversation with Jason Shepard doing all of our awards for this last season, we are now, he had to go. He had work things. He's traveling with the women's basketball team in Cincinnati, and he had to go. But Adam and I are going to want to look back on this bowl game just because of how big and significant it was. Also, it's our last chance to do this for several months until next September when the season starts up again. So, Adam, you were not on the live reaction show after, which if you haven't, you can go catch that. I'll put a link to that as well. But tell me, we were texting a little bit, but tell us your thoughts, your reaction, how you felt during that game.
Yeah. I missed the post game show. I'm here in Utah, broadcasting from my parents' basement of all places. So, but the bowl game was shocking. I had picked BYU to win, but I didn't feel great about that pick, especially going in. It just felt like it wasn't the media attention that Colorado got. It was the matchups to me that was the biggest question. Can we hang with that level of athleticism? A team that has really building momentum as the season goes on and playing their best football. And the defensive scheme that BYU brought was astounding. It was incredible what they did. And so for me, the game represented more than just a great national platform. You mentioned 8 million viewers. And I think it'll really catch the attention for preseason polls next year. As meaningless as those are, that like we talked about, you're in a better position when you're higher in a preseason poll. So I think all that plays well. But for me as a fan, more than anything else, it brought hope for next year. We had gone through this November where we really struggled and did not look like ourselves like we had through the first 8 games of the season. And it just felt like was that a fluke? Were those teams not quite as good as we thought? What was the reason why we just game after game after game we can't seem to put it together to have a great game like we had before? And so to go out and play like that against Colorado, to me, represented a ton of hope for next year because we bring back a ton of production, and it shows that those first 8-9 weeks of the season weren't a fluke. To go out there and do that against a legitimate Colorado team, against a Heisman Trophy winner, that's no joke. I mean, Colorado came to play. They played all their stars. They weren't sitting anybody. They took that game as serious as any team in a bowl game. And for us to perform like that, to me, says next year we can be good. Now, we can get into next year in the coming months, and I'm not saying we're going to go 11-2 again, but I do think we're going to be a very good team. We're going to be very competitive.
Yeah, I think that's really good summary. I like your point about Colorado coming in ready to play. I mean, they didn't have to play their star guys, and they did, which means I have to believe that they were taking this game seriously and they wanted to go out there and do their best. And it's just it really goes to show what this coaching staff and what these players, their capabilities. And so it makes you wonder down the stretch, was it just too much catching up to them? They needed rest. Was it, I would say, the depth, but we still had guys that were out or guys that already hit the portal or, still had some guys that were injured. So it's not like we were 100%. So, for BYU to come out and perform like this on that stage is awesome. Well, on the flip side of that, it also kind of hurts a little bit more because it leaves you wondering like what could have been a little bit near the end of the season. You started thinking, maybe, we could have gotten there, but maybe we weren't cut out for it. Now we see this and start thinking, maybe we were cut out for this, and it stinks. It hurts, especially seeing, like Bama losing to Michigan today. We're recording New Year's Eve. I mean, this just, everyone thought, oh, Bama should be in, and who else was ranked? Miami lost. They didn't play Cam Ward for the second half and lost a 1 point.
Which is I know this is the era we're in college football, but playing the first half and not the second half, man, that one astounds me. It really does. That's a topic for a different day. But come on, you're going to sit out one half of football and cost your team a bowl win. Sit out the game. I get it. That's a business decision. It happens. As a fan, I don't like to see it, but I understand that a little bit more. But Cam Ward playing the first half, sitting out the second half when his team loses by 1 point. Come on, man.
Yeah. So, but nonetheless, BYU wasn't even in the conversation for the playoff. No. And then for these guys to go out and lose their bowl game and BYU to win in such dominant fashion is like we talked about, the viewers, the stage, the hype, at least that Colorado was getting. And what I love about this is BYU being ranked higher was still the underdog. And nobody was really giving them a chance they'll go home and find out about how much the commentators were talking about Colorado instead of them. And we knew that was going to be the case.
Yeah.
And that still can give them that chip on the shoulder in this offseason, saying, look, no matter how good we are, no matter what we do, people still continue to discount what we can do and what we've done. And so
well, which I think BYU needs, because if you're talking about what made the difference between 23 and 24, they mostly rode with the same guys, right? Same schemes. Obviously, year two in Hill's defense made a world of difference, but you can tell what they said throughout the season, what they said after the bowl game, and what made this such a special season is they brought it in the offseason. They had a huge chip on their shoulder, and can you continue that after an 11-2 season, and an Alamo Bowl win, and two finish second or third in the conference? Can you continue? I don't know. I think you can, but this gives you something, that disrespect by the committee to not even consider him, to not even be in the discussion. Nobody in the media or on the committee thought that BYU deserved to be there, and they came out and made a statement to say, we deserve to be in the conversation. And Satake said it in his post game comments that, look, we're not going to get caught up on whether or not we deserve to be in the playoff or not. We control what we can control, and we didn't control what we could have controlled to get in the playoffs. So it is what it is, and we're not going to get into that. And I think that's the right approach. But you hope that carries some kind of chip on their shoulder into the offseason, because that is the way BYU is going to do it, is with that attitude. And you have that fire after a 5-7 season. Do you have it after an 11-2 season?
To your first point, Satake is so classy. He's always saying the right thing, and he's always very thoughtful about his approach. And whether he really means it inside or not, I think he does. I think he is a very genuine guy. I mean, I wonder if part of him is upset about it, but the fact that he's always saying the right thing is awesome. I love that, as compared to some other coaches out there and the way they act. But yeah, you want to see that, and so to go out and win in such dominant fashion and to have such a successful season, you still want them to have that chip on the shoulder. And so I just think of that, like, hopefully they can use some of this as like, look, they still didn't believe in us after all this. Let's go into next season and really make them believe. Having said that, came up in the comments of the video last Saturday was, how do I think, BYU is going to end up, how is this going to help BYU and rank in the final rankings? I did refer to the CFP committee and their ranking, and they don't do a final ranking after these. So I was wrong about that. But they, the final AP poll, where do you think BYU will end up? And do you think that they'll start next season ranked? And my thought, well, actually, I'm curious to hear your thought first.
Well, I was having this conversation with my buddy after the game, and he felt like maybe BYU's top 10 now, and I felt like that's just a little too much. I could see us 12 to 13 tops. As a BYU fan, I am institutionalized and accustomed to being underranked to where I think we should be ranked, and I think most fan bases feel that way. So I don't know that we climb quite that high, but with Alabama losing today, that was big. Miami lost, as we mentioned. So there's opportunities for BYU to climb up there close to the top 10. I don't think we get a top 10 ranking, but I do think we certainly finish in the top 15, which is a feather in the cap. I do think we begin next season ranked, because the preseason polls look at two things. One, where did you finish last year in the rankings? And two, what's your returning production? And BYU shows really well in both of those. And so I would be surprised if we're not ranked next year. Not necessarily top 15. I don't think they'll mirror this year's, because you got to get the blue bloods that get their automatic super high ranking and all that stuff. But I do think we'll find ourselves in the top 25 to start next year.
With Jason gone, it seems like you and I are starting to agree a little bit more. That was kind of my response. Is I hadn't put a lot of thought into it yet, but I felt like top 15 seems about right. The AP voters, for some reason, continually don't put BYU as high as we feel like they should be. And now a lot of it still depends on the teams ahead of us. Now, Bama losing is good. Indiana losing big is good. I don't know if BYU gets ranked ahead of Bama now, or Miami losing a close one when there's some more context to that. So it's hard to say how they're going to view all these games. Top 10 seems like a stretch. I could see as high as maybe like 12, but I think BYU will be top 15. I think that's fair to say. They're 17 now, huge win. Teams ahead of them are losing. Easy to say top 15. And then, yeah, I think BYU will start next season ranked. I don't think they'll start as highly ranked as they'll finish this season, which is basically what you're saying. I think we'll be top 15 at the end of the year. I don't think we're necessarily quite that high to start next season. But but it's still, like you said, that is key because, yeah, ultimately it's just the Alamo Bowl. There's not really much on the line. It was a conference game kind of, but because of who we were playing and the hype around it, but also because of what it means, the perception going into next season. And we know how much impact those initial rankings can have by anchoring the conversation around all these teams and where you start and how your subsequent rankings come in. And so just starting ranked and not having to work our way in. Now you could argue maybe that would take away from the chip on BYU's shoulder, but I think there's going to be plenty of things to get this team motivated by. And you saw like how much they learned from that disappointing season last year, that hopefully they can be fueled off of those 2 games this year, and really build off of that. And yeah, I love the continuity. We're already bringing in some good pieces. We talked a lot about Chase Roberts already, bringing him back, which is huge. I was actually even though we have a lot of depth at wide receiver, I don't know if we had someone else that could do what he's doing. And so getting him back.
It'd have to be JoJo Phillips to step into that role and really make the jump, which I think he can do. I think JoJo Phillips will end his career where Chase Roberts is at. I think he has that kind of potential, but he hasn't done it yet. We haven't asked him to do it yet. And so it would be, you're looking at saying, all right, Hagan or JoJo Phillips, somebody's got to step up and take on that Chase Roberts role where you bring him back, and then JoJo Phillips is your second. I really like that. I was thrilled that Chase Roberts came back.
Yeah. Yeah. So let me kind of backtrack to the actual game now. What do you think was the difference maker in this game? Like, what allowed BYU to be just so dominant?
To me, it's the same thing that we've said throughout the season. It was Jay Hill's scheme. Hans Olsen said this in the postgame comments. He said when he was talking to Jay Hill and he was watching some of his media comments, he kind of had this wry smile. He said, and after a couple seasons with the coach, as a media member, you kind of get to know their tells. He says, to me, that was one of his tells. Like, he just kind of had this, like, yeah, we're really excited to play this offense. And just kind of his attitude when he was talking about that, he's like, Jay Hill knows something that no one else knows. And it was just, to me, one of those classic Jay Hill scheme games where he knew how to get through that offensive line had been Swiss cheese at times for Colorado. And he knew how to scheme against that. And they were mauling Shedeur Sanders all game. And what worried me is if we've had one Achilles heel, it's been the mobile quarterback that can run, when things get tough and the pocket breaks down. We seem to give up chunk plays, and they schemed for that. Even as athletic as Sanders is, who is the most athletic quarterback we faced all year, even more so than Kevin Jennings. And I thought that was a tough matchup. And yet there was nothing open downfield. All of their offense came on 2 passes to a Heisman Trophy winner. And that was it. And they literally shut down everything else from Colorado. So it was the scheme of Jay Hill that came in and just brought QB pressure after QB pressure, sack, picks, just a classic Jay Hill defensive game.
Yeah. One of the comments throughout the reaction video was the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. And I agree. I mean, that was a big part of it is dominating that. Schematically, I don't know, like, are we really just that much better, more athletic? Because that's what it felt like. But I feel like it has to be scheme. And like you said, I think that was a great point. In the preview video, we had a guest on, David Talks Buffs, from the College Huddle. And he came on and we got to special teams and he said, this is actually a weakness of ours in a lot of different areas. And I thought that was interesting because as I watched, like, special teams was huge in this game. Yes, we have those, the punt return, we have the recovered onside kick, which are incredible in and of themselves, but even just your routine field goal kick was missed. And their kickoff returns were continually getting stopped short of the 20. And then on contrary, like BYU starting in like at their own 40 plus, almost every possession it felt like. And so it was special teams, but in a lot of different ways, special teams was really coming through. And that wasn't, again, the whole game, but that really set BYU up to continue piling it on. And so, in that sense, it felt a lot like the Kansas State game, even though our offense, I mean, the what could have been. By the way, how did you feel about seeing Bohannon out there?
I love seeing Bohannon. I would have liked to have seen him earlier in the season to do
Too.
something like this. Great change of pace, a much faster runner than Retzlaff, and he can still throw the ball. So it's a nice changeup. Based on how the season went, you certainly trust that Retzlaff was the right choice. But it seemed like a great red zone option when you really need to keep the defense guessing and on their heels. And what are they going to do? You got someone in Bohannon who's a super strong runner, but it's not pure wildcat. He's certainly a strong enough runner to run a wildcat, and that's how they used him. But it's not because he's comparatively such a good passer to a traditional running back who's going to run that. So I liked using him in that situation. I even thought the trick play that went to him where he threw the pick was a great call because he had so many options. He could have run that thing for 15 yards. He could have sat back there for another 5 seconds before he threw it. Obviously, he made a bad decision to throw it deep into traffic like that and throw the interception. But I really liked how he was used, and I kind of wish we would have done a little bit more of that throughout the season. There's been some discussion that Retzlaff was injured in November, and maybe that's why our offense struggled. As a fan, you're kind of pulling your hair like, man, why didn't we at least give Bohannon the ball one of those games? So I loved seeing him. I think it was a great farewell for a great career for him, but would have liked to see a little bit more of that during the season.
Yeah, well said. I thought at the very least, why not on Senior Day against Houston?
That's where I thought we'd see him. Yeah, it was on Senior Day.
Yeah, if not sooner. And just I thought at some point in the season we would have seen some sort of package with him, and we didn't. But I thought Houston for sure. So I was glad that he got out there. It's a bummer that his final. I think it was his final pass was that interception, of his collegiate career. Would have loved for him to get another touchdown. But I think he was really classy in his time at BYU. It seemed like by all accounts, he was really still invested in the team and everything. And, he took a chance coming here and, didn't work out, I think, as he had hoped, but, certainly wish the best for him and would have loved to see a little bit more from him. So, as with all the guys, obviously there's portal. There's several guys that are going right now. We don't want to get too much into this. We'll do maybe later in the offseason once more of the dust settles. But, there's guys that you wish them well and you understand they're like, they started getting passed up by younger guys and the rosters are being trimmed down. There's not as many spots and you want to see these guys go and play and excel somewhere else. So,
BYU's done really well in the portal 2 years running. I know they took a lot of flack last year for not getting more guys in the portal and all that, but their approach to recruit our own guys first has been brilliant so far. And I think until they struggle with that, or until it's there's an obvious gap in their personnel, I think you got to say they're doing the right thing with that approach. It's cutting against the grain instead of scrambling to see who you can get from the portal. They're saying, no, our guys are the priority. And then, where guys fit our defensive line, for example, this year, then we'll bring in the portal. But the guys who are leaving the team this year are guys who you say, yeah, go. I wish them the best. I don't think it's a huge loss, any one of those guys, except to our depth. And you hope the incoming guys are going to make up for that.
Yeah, Crew Wakely stings a little bit, but I have to wonder if he had some sort of conversation or something, just realizing where his place is on the team. I don't know. I thought he was great. He'll be missed definitely in terms of depth, but we have lots of guys and young guys too out there. So yeah, I don't know. It's I agree. You want to keep your team. You want to keep the your core together and then just add where you need it. And some people are getting frustrated there wasn't enough. I'm saying that's a good sign because we don't have to go to the portal to dig deep. Also, a lot of the most talented people are still playing football games right now that will eventually hit the portal. So just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean other guys aren't out there. But having said all that, BYU still brought in some good players already, some very good players, and filling big needs that we have. So, and then Chase Roberts wasn't a portal guy, but they brought him back. And so that's huge. Anyway, well, we are going long now and we're off the topic of the bowl game, which is what we were supposed to do. We were initially talking about. So we'll leave it at that. Any final thoughts now that the season's wrapped up?
Man, just so cool. Just so much gratitude as a fan to be able to watch a team like that on a very unexpected year, to be able to do that. So You don't get a whole lot of these as a fan. Either the team underperforms, or they'll meet expectation or slightly exceed it. You don't get a lot of these where you're thinking, yeah, maybe 5-7, 6-6, and you go 11-2 and vie for a conference title and win the Alamo Bowl. So just super cool looking back on this year. Yeah, excited for the future.
Yeah, I'm with you. This was a fantastic season. So much fun. And yes, BYU came up short at the end, got, to that home stretch and wasn't able to pull through. And that stings, and they'll always sting. What could have been. We'll be sitting there with Uncle Rico, wondering, if we could go back. But, at the end of the day, like you said, we overperformed. We were happy. We're like, after the K-State win, it was like, hey, we're ahead of schedule. Whatever happens after this, we feel pretty good.
Right.
We're gonna, we felt really good about our chances of a bowl game at that point. That's how we were still talking. And then to see week after week and how exciting that was. There's so many memorable games. We talked about in the top, first portion of this video about all the key plays and memories that we're going to have from this season. And it's always going to be a special season. It was a lot of fun. And, if you're only happy if BYU comes away national champion, then, that's going to be, you're going to have a lot of very disappointing seasons. So you got to come away happy with this season. I mean, it's just been amazing. And to see BYU do it and at this level too.
Yeah. Yeah. It was awesome. And I like that it portends well for the future. So much of a football fan. I mean, you get 12 to 13 games a year, right? Those last 3 hours each. The rest of the time as a football fan is based on hope and anticipation. And so going through the offseason last year and you're like, well, we're probably not going to be that great. Hopefully we make some improvement. And now looking forward and thinking, man, we're bringing back that same group of offensive players. Can they get a little bit more consistent? Can we get a little bit more production there? Defense is coming back. Now we got year 3 of Jay Hill defense and incredible linebacking. It's just a totally different feel going into this offseason, and really, really exciting to think what we can be into the future, not only next year, but 2 and 3 years down the road, the type of program we're building. This puts us way ahead of schedule. So as a fan, when so much of your time as a fan is spent thinking, well, how good can we be? Now you come away with a ton of optimism instead of last year where you're like, wow, it's going to be years before we're good.
Yeah. Yeah, we know that we have the pieces, although in the Big 12, nothing's given. You look at what Utah, Oklahoma State, Kansas, all performing. They were bringing back a lot of production. Quarterbacks who had been there for, ever in the case of Utah and Oklahoma State. So there was a lot of returning production, and these guys came in at the bottom of the conference. And so there's nothing guaranteed. And hopefully they drive that message home to these guys in the offseason. I saw something, who was it? Was it Mark Collins, or I can't remember who it was on social, but he's back to work and is already out there training and stuff. And hopefully that's not just for show. Hopefully these guys take that seriously, and they're getting it already.
And I think that's what the bowl game shows you, is these guys could have started Christmas vacation and taken bowl prep as, I think the bowl prep and the way they played there is a reflection of how this team takes the offseason and how seriously they take this chip on their shoulder. Is they didn't have to go in and put in that much work to dominate Colorado by that much. And it just shows you they know how to do it. They know how to put the work in the offseason. And so to me, that's what makes me I'm always cautiously optimistic. I'm never optimistic as a BYU fan, but it makes me cautiously optimistic now for the future that they can go back and they can have an offseason just like they did the year before or similar to it and start to build on what they did this year.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, we look at the jump they made. They obviously used this offseason really well to make that kind of leap that they did from last year to this year. So I really hope and I believe that they'll keep that rolling, especially with this coaching staff they have in place. I really believe with what they're doing, and it seems like the players are bought into. And even without Tyler Batty, maybe he can call in at halftime or something and keep these guys motivated as they need to. But all right, well. We'll do another wrap up, I think, in the postseason as we go and can evaluate the changes and everything. And obviously we will be getting into men's basketball. We actually recorded during the end of the Arizona State game. Fortunately, that one became a blowout. So not missing a close one there. But anyway, so we'll continue to roll out content as the season goes. And so please subscribe to the channel so you can be sure to catch all of that. Happy New Year to everyone. And as always, go Cougs.
Go Cougs.